probably heard our focus verse on today numerous times. Philippians chapter 4, verse 4 says, "Rejoice in the Lord always." And again, I say, rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say, rejoice. And so on our first stop, I want to talk about keeping our joy. Keeping our joy. It seems redundant that I should talk to you all about keeping your joy. But if I were honest, and if we were honest, as the question or the song once said, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you really knew you were happy, if you were challenged to clap your hands and you had a truth serum inserted in you that forced you to be totally honest, if you were dealing with life situations that put you in a crisis moment, a crisis situation, a challenge of your life, you might find yourself experiencing what I would term to be a joyless Christian experience. You see, there are many folk today who experience what I would call this joyless Christianity that Paul writes to address throughout the book of Philippians, that I hope that by the end of this text today, that by the end of our time today, we might resolve that we will leave here no longer holding on to a joyless Christian experience, a Christian experience that comes to us coming in and out of a church building Sunday after Sunday, holding on to a same expression, doing the same old things, the same old way, the same old time, trying to go through the same old motions, this hoping that the same old insanity will lead us to some kind of new result. Paul expresses that these same folk had some kind of joyless Christian experience because, ironically, they lived a double life. You see folk who have a joyless Christian experience live one way when the pastor's watching and another way when the pastor isn't watching. I hope you go back and read, pray through the book of Philippians, because Paul is addressing the fact that when you're living a double life, when you're living a double age, and when you're really not living this thing that you're talking about, when you're Sunday morning saint and Monday life happens, joyless Christianity will creep in on you, and you won't really know what to do when life gets the best of you. When you say you have faith to walk on water and the storms of life come, you won't know what to do. Because on Sunday morning you can shout and sing and get happy, but when the eyes of folk are on you, and you're left to deal with life's devices all on your own, and you are left to deal with life as life comes at you, you have a way of ducking and dodging and getting around the truth, and you find yourself with a joyless Christian experience. You see, folk with a joyless Christian experience don't realize that God is at work in them. Folk who live with a joyless Christian experience go about life just thinking that stuff happens. You know, there's a phrase that substitute stuff with something else. But folk who live a joyless Christianity seem to think that there's something about their life that they're just going around as a puppet. But they fail to see that they're part of God's scheme, that God is at work doing something that they can't imagine, that God is using their life experience to speak to somebody else. Well, what do you mean, preacher? By my life experience, God is giving hope to somebody else, so that as I am going through and as people see what I am experiencing, as people see what I am going through, somebody else can draw hope to keep on going, that if I can stay the course, that somehow, some way, somebody else can keep on holding on, that if I can hold on, that my joy comes. Because God is at work in me, and God is giving me the desire to do what God is doing. Joyless Christianity comes because there are some folks that do good stuff, but at the same time they're complaining about the stuff they're doing. Don't you know some folk like that? They do good stuff, but they're all the time complaining about the stuff they're doing. They're always doing, but they're murmuring, arguing, bickering, and complaining about the good they're doing, and you say to them, you might as well not even do it. You know, I got a cardinal rule. Don't do nothing for me if you got to brag about it. Don't do nothing for me if you got to rub it back in my face. You ain't got to do anything for me if you got to rub it, if you got to throw it back at me. You can keep it. I'll figure it out. In fact, if you think you're that good, I know a God that will send another way. But there are some folk in the church like that think if I don't do it, it won't get done. But don't you know that God can make another way if you sit down? I hear Jesus say, if these hold their peace, then the stones will cry out. I don't do it because I'm so good. I do it because I don't want any stones crying out. For me, I do it because I want to give my praise to God. I do it because this is my honor. This is the way I worship God. And I don't have time to murmur and complain about the good I do. In fact, I don't have time. If I'm really doing good, I don't have time to sit back and murmur and complain about it. If you really got time to murmur and complain about it, in fact, you might think about you ain't doing any good at all. You're living a joyless Christianity. Paul will say it this way, you just got your glory. If you're singing your own tune, if you're blowing your own trumpet, you just got your glory. And so Paul says we can avoid this downgrade controversy if we just learn that God is at work in the end. We get some fruit, we get some evidence, because when I look at what God is doing, and I look at the fact that if I live right, if I do right, if I focus on the part that I'm playing in this picture, if I do my role, then something great is going to happen, and I can look back at the end and I can say, look at the part I played. Paul is saying we can avoid the downgrade controversy when we learn to look at the big picture. And in fact, many of us get caught up in the here and now. We get so caught up in what's going on now that we miss it out. Well, what do you mean, preacher? We think folk getting over on us. We think folk taking advantage of us, but Here we want to learn that God is doing a greater work, because here when folk are taking advantage of us, God is using us to plant a seed. Here when we think folk are taking advantage of us, God is using us to till a soil. Here when we think folk are taking advantage of us, God is using us to invest in somebody. Here when we think folk are taking advantage of us, God is using us to cultivate the lives of somebody else. And when we think about what God is doing with our lives, Paul becomes a witness, because he said, here I am in prison. Here I am going through some stuff. But I've got joy in the midst of all that I'm going through, because I know God is doing something great in your life. And so Paul looks back at his own experience and his own circumstances, and he says these words. He says, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. This is Paul defining his joy. You see, many of us have not learned to define our joy. We learn to look at the here and now, and we get stuck on where we are and where we're trying to go. But Paul says to live is Christ, and to die is gain. He put perspective on his joy. We have no joy because we have no perspective of what God is doing in our situation. But Paul says to live is Christ, and to die is gain. Paul's perspective of joy in the midst of trials, in the midst of circumstances beyond our control, causes us to take a new look at what we're going through, because he says to live is Christ. You see, he says to us that when I think about what I'm living for, you see, first of all, many of us are living without goal. We're living without purpose. We're living without direction. But he says to live is Christ. Well, let me see if I can work on it a little bit. Many of us don't have joy because for us to live is us. And when to live is us, when to live is us, when we are pursuing our own objectives, when we are pursuing our own goals, when we are pursuing our own motives, to live is us. Our own stuff becomes elusive. Our own stuff becomes a trap. When our own stuff becomes something we can never catch. We always want more. To live is us. Becomes something we can never catch. We want something that we can never get. But when to live is Christ, we become something that the model is established. We become chasing after something that the goal is set. Target is established, and we realize that we don't have time to live without joy. I don't have time to waste. Let me see if I can go back down history lane for a little while. Call the roll of Otis Redding. Otis Redding would say, I don't have time to sit by the dock of the bay and watch time roll away. I don't have time to see the train roll in and to see the same train leave again. I don't have time. When to live is Christ. Because the truth of the matter is that too many folk dying for me to wait around, waiting and dealing and moping about my situation, dealing with the fact that here I am in this hellhole, for me to sit around moping about what I don't have. To live is Christ. You understand? Paul will go on to say, I've learned to be content with whatever I have, because for me to live is Christ. I've learned to share the gospel with whoever I've come in contact with. In other words, Paul said, I don't have time to deal with black or white. I don't have time to deal with Jew or Greek. I don't have time to deal with male or female. I don't have time to deal with all of these things because living is Christ. I've got goals. I've got to reach, and so I don't have time to live without joy. But Paul also points our attention to Jesus, and he says that Jesus becomes our example for having joy. He said, let us have this mind. Let us learn to think like Christ. Paul said, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. I hope I can get our attention now, because many of us make the excuse that we're not Jesus. So we try to escape life that way. We tell ourselves that we're off the hook because we're not Jesus. Jesus was perfect. But Paul said we need to learn to think like Jesus. Can I see if we can work this out for a little bit? Because too many of us have lost our joy because we've convinced ourselves that we cannot think like Jesus. We've lost our joy because we've gone through life not allowing ourselves to think like Jesus. We allowed ourselves to lose our joy because we told ourselves that Jesus was perfect and where we are. We've got to learn to think like Jesus. Jesus had the power to pray himself out of the cross. He had the authority and the ability to pray himself out of the cross, but because he was who he was. And you know, we have the ability to pray ourselves out of stuff. But Jesus does not pray himself out of the situation.
Come on now.
And I know we rarely ever deal with the fact. I know we like to put a band-aid understanding on why does Jesus not pray himself out of the cross?
Come on now.
We tell ourselves, well, he had to go to the cross for us. Yeah. He had to go to the cross for us. But there's a more practical reason Paul wants us to know that Jesus does not pray himself out of the cross. Jesus does not pray himself out of the cross because Jesus shows us that we need to learn to be obedient to God's will. Well, what am I trying to say? We lose our joy because we pray ourselves out of God's will. I need to slow down because I learned a parenting moment. You've got to let children grow. You've got to let them. They don't learn how to walk unless you let them fall. And the protective parent that always keeps the child from falling ends up with a child that will never walk. And what we tend to pray is that God will never let us fall. This is how we shape our prayer life. Lord, never let me fall. And then we wonder, why is it that we can't walk in his word? tonight, Lord, don't let me fall. But Lord, pick me up. You don't believe me? Go back through the Psalms. Yes, we fall. But the Lord picks us up. It is not that we don't learn, that the Lord does not prevent us from falling, but the Lord picks us up. We have to learn how to pray. When we learn the mind of Jesus, we learn how to pray and we recapture our joy. Because we learn a new style of prayer. We don't want life easy, but we have joy that the world can't give. You see, the world gives a joy that wants to tell us everything will be all right, but the joy that God gives is that he holds us in his hand, that even when we fall, that we will not be utterly cast down. I'm so glad that the Lord will never let us go, that our joy doesn't come from the things we think they come from. Well, you still looking at me funny. Hear what the Hebrew writer said about Jesus. He said, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. You see, you want joy. You want to keep your joy. You got to learn to go through. You can't keep your joy if you're sacrificing what you got to go through to get it. Then Paul said, if you want to keep your joy, because he said, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say, rejoice. Paul said, I've tried all these other methods. I'm a Hebrew of Hebrews, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Pharisee by nature. I was born circumcised. I've been through all the religious rites. None of that brought me any joy. But you want to know how I got joy? I came to know Jesus. And here is where we make a critical mistake. A lot of folk come to the church. A lot of folk get to know folk in the church. But very few folk get to know Jesus. Well, what does it mean to get to know Jesus? I get to know him as my Savior. In other words, I realize that I can't do it by myself. I realize that without him, I'm lost. I realize that without him, I'm like a ship without a sail. I realize that without him, I'm in this world tossing to and fro. I realize that without him, I'm hopeless. I realize that without him, I can't make it. I realize that without him, my hope is lost. I need Jesus. It's not a woman. It's not a man. It's not money. It's not a car. It's not a house. It's not a clothes. It's not clothes. But I need Jesus. To save me. Get to know him. And the power of his resurrection. Get to know him. And the power of his resurrection. Joyless folk are disconnected. It's dangerous being in a place where you have access but no opportunity. Y'all thought I was rambling earlier. Tell you stuff be on my mind. It's dangerous when you have access but no opportunity. To know Christ and the power of his resurrection. In Chicago, we work with folk who lived a mile away from Magnificent Mile. Now, in these projects, those of you who watch Good Times, the Cabrini Green projects, a mile away from the Magnificent Mile. Cabrini Green, where folk were shot down on a daily basis. Crime-riddled, impoverished. 1 mile. You could look down the street and see. Magnificent Mile, where Oprah Winfrey's penthouse is located. It's a dangerous place to have access and no opportunity. To be in a place where you can see privilege and opportunity, but you can't get it. The power of his resurrection. We in the church lose our joy because we see what we celebrate, but we fail to reach out and grab it. It's right in front of us. The power of his resurrection. He said at his resurrection, all power in heaven and in earth is in my hands. At his resurrection, to live in a condition where we can see that he has all power, and yet to feel helpless. But Paul says we have joy when we know we have access and opportunity because we know Christ and the power of his resurrection. But Paul says here's the gateway that we miss. So many folk in the church want to be privileged. But here's the gateway to the power of his resurrection by the fellowship or the sharing of his suffering. Being made like him in his death. Many of us want what we see and we want to know what we have, but we don't want to go through what he went through to get it. If you want the joy, this world cannot give it to you. in this world can't take it away, but this joy didn't give it. And you can't get it from this world. It comes through the resurrection because we are members of the kingdom. Well, if you don't believe me, go to the whole mark of faith. Go down the scroll and hear what the Hebrew writer said about them. He says that they got excited. They didn't count the fact that they were citizens of this world, but they looked to a kingdom on the other side. They were ready to let go of this world. The joy that we have, the world didn't give it, and the world can't take it away, because it comes through the resurrection power of our Lord and our Savior. I'm so glad that because he got up and declared all power is in his hands and invited us to be partakers of his sufferings, to share and be partners in his death. We have joy that the world can't take away. That when troubles come, when trials come, when bills come, when heartache comes, when death comes, so that Paul could say that living is Christ, but dying is gain. So that Paul knew to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. I know that on this side there's trouble. On this side there's strife. But Paul said, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Too many of us have joyless Christian experience because our joy is not in Christ, but our joy is in everything else. But because we're members and citizens of God's kingdom, because we know that greater belongs beyond this place, we have joy in all circumstances.